If you think you've seen the worst F1 crashes ever, think again. Formula One is known for having the fastest race cars on the planet, with exhilarating side-by-side racing around some of the world's toughest racetracks. Mix that with high stakes and adrenaline, and what you get is a grid full of drivers willing to risk it all. So, when cars are being pushed to the absolute limit, crashes are inevitable. You're watching Racer's Reverie, and in this video, we're going to show you the worst non-fatal crashes in Formula One history. First up is one of the most shocking crashes ever. Throughout F1 history, safety standards have been improving, and thankfully so, because if these cars weren't as strong, we're not sure these two drivers would have survived this outrageous crash. During the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, drivers Nick Heidfeld and Takuma Sato had one of the biggest coming-togethers ever seen in Formula One. Austria's Red Bull Ring has a habit of producing big smashes thanks to several big braking zones, and on lap 1 of the 2002 visit, this dramatic collision at turn 3 shook the racing world. As Nick Heidfeld approached the corner, he hit the brakes and suddenly found his car to be completely out of control. He veered towards the apex and went headfirst into the pack of cars who were turning into the corner and smashed straight into the side of Takuma Sato at full speed. Sato had no warning that he was about to be hit and took the full force of the impact of Heidberg's Sauber, which was traveling at astronomical speed.
Heidfeld battles for fifth, but the German is too eager on the brakes and the repercussions are horrific. That sends shockwaves down the pit lane.
I saw that it was right in front of me. Good shot.
Somehow, both drivers managed to escape this truly shocking crash without injury. Back in 1992, Gerhard Berger found himself at the wheel of the successful Williams FW14, trying his hardest to beat teammate Nigel Mansell, who was on his way to clinching the championship. This was evident during the 1992 Portuguese Grand Prix, when he was stuck behind the McLaren of Gerhard Berger in an intense battle. As the battle went on, Patrese got closer and closer, and coming into the front straight, he found himself right on the McLaren's gearbox. But when he pulled out to execute the overtake, he left it all a bit too late, hitting Berger's rear left tire and sending him flying straight into the air at insane speed. The impact and landing instantly ripped two wheels off Berger's car and left it in a complete wreck, sliding down along the pit wall. He was extremely lucky not to hit anything or anyone that was scattered along the front straight, and managed to walk away without serious injuries. The Brazilian Grand Prix of 2003 is considered one of the wildest and most chaotic races in Formula One history. It included several crashes, but by far the two worst ones were courtesy of Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso. As it often does at the Interlagos track, the skies opened and the race instantly became a full wet race. Moments later, Mark Webber sent his Jaguar into the wall, causing a horrible crash. He suffered a huge impact and sent debris flying across the track, including two of his wheels with tires still attached. Fernando Alonso then rounded the corner at full speed, and unfortunately for him, had no time to react to the debris. He drove straight into one of Webber's loose wheels at around 160 miles per hour. It instantly snatched the car from Alonso's control and sent him straight into the tire barrier head first, causing a monumental crash for the Spaniard.
Oh, and we've got another car. Alonso. We think Alonso's come round and probably found
race stopped.
Red flag. Race has stopped.
But
and it'll go back.
Yes,
it'll go back
certainly.
one lap. So
Martin, I have to interrupt you because the Jordan team are bouncing up and down in the pit lane. We're looking at the images there of that incident of Alonso.
He was taken from the track on a stretcher, yet still managed to finish the race in third position. Luckily, neither of the drivers were seriously injured in these truly shocking hits. Now let's have a look at a crash that happened more recently, which quickly became one of the biggest talking points of the season. During qualifying for the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Mick Schumacher suffered one of the most painful-looking crashes in Formula One history. He was attempting to hustle his Haas VF22 into Q1 at the tricky Jeddah street track during F1's second visit to the newly constructed street track. Being the fastest street track in the world and with the concrete walls so close all lap round, one small mistake can be extremely costly. Suddenly, while on a flying lap, Schumacher lost control of his car on a curb. And out of nowhere, it snapped violently and threw him into the concrete wall at 170 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that one side of the car was completely destroyed, and Mick was unable to get out of the car for several minutes.
Oh, Otmar! We'll just leave it there as Mick Schumacher hits the wall. 2 tyres coming loose as he hit the wall as well, and that is the second red flag of this session.
He was taken into an ambulance to the medical center and escaped uninjured, but was unable to race the next day. That's what happens when your crash registers a force of over 60 Gs. By the way, if you'd like to see more of the best motorsports content just like this, please consider liking this video and hitting subscribe for more quality content. Now, let's get back to the video. For number 5 on our list, we've decided to go back 30 years to this outrageous F1 pileup. Some accidents stand out in the minds of F1 fans for their downright brutality, and the sheer fact that no fatalities occurred, and this is one of those crashes. In 1994, Eddie Irvine was involved in an intense battle with the debuting Jos Verstappen during the Brazilian GP at the fan-favorite Interlagos track. When Irvine tried to pass the lapped car of Eric Bernard, he didn't realize that Verstappen was alongside him and pushed him onto the grass. Traveling at top speed, Verstappen's car spun out of control, hitting both Irvine and Bernard, causing his car to go airborne. Verstappen's car somersaulted into the air and flew straight into Brundle's McLaren, with his rear tire striking Brundle directly on the head in a horrific incident. Miraculously, Brundle escaped serious injury in a year where high-speed crashes had already taken the lives of 2 drivers. It was truly one of the scariest and downright luckiest non-fatal Formula One accidents in history. Now for number 6 on our list, let's take a look at a very scary crash that you have probably never seen before. The 1982 French Grand Prix took place at the Paul Ricard circuit. Yes, Paul Ricard before they covered it in blue and red runoff, and spectators were hoping to get close to some great racing action. But some spectators got a bit closer than they would have liked. The 1982 F1 season was quite the nightmare of a season, with many huge crashes occurring around the globe. And one of the most dangerous crashes in Formula One history unfolded when Mauro Baldi collided with Jochen Mess when battling intensely at high speed. Baldi went for an overtake up the inside at the end of the straight, but made contact with Mess mid-corner and flipped his car instantly. Mess's car skated straight towards the barrier at insane speed upside down, and hit it incredibly hard. It pierced the fence and went into the grandstand where spectators were standing. Debris went flying and the car erupted into flames, with onlookers fearing the worst. Somehow, nobody was injured in this truly unbelievable crash. It is fair to say that Formula One and everyone involved dodged a disaster that day. Number 7 on our list involves a crash that happened more recently, but it proves that modern F1 cars can still end up facing the wrong way up from time to time. Nico Hülkenberg was driving for the Renault F1 team during the 2018 season, and during the season finale at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, he had one of the wildest moments of his whole career. On the opening lap, he was fiercely battling the makeup positions, and sent a move around the outside of Romain Grosjean's Haas, but to Hülkenberg's complete surprise, he made contact with Grosjean's front wheel that instantly lifted his car off the ground. The contact was so big, his car went flying sideways at high speed, and before he knew it, his car was upside down.
But Leclerc really fancied with some top speed down there and move, and that is the Renault of Hülkenberg going over and over and over and out of this race. And that is Nico Hülkenberg against the barrier, flames coming from the back.
He barrel rolled twice and made contact with the wall, with his car taking a lot of damage in the process. Luckily for him, the halo had been introduced at the start of that year, and he managed to walk away unscathed from this terrifying trip, once they got him out of his car, that is. And to continue the theme of rollovers, this next crash is one of the worst ever in Formula 1. It came courtesy of Robert Kubica, who at the time was an extremely promising young driver who many expected to become a Formula 1 world champion one day. However, his career was derailed slightly in 2007 after this monumental crash at the Canadian Grand Prix. Driving for BMW Sauber, he was approaching one of the largest braking zones on the whole circuit when his car left the track at over 180 miles per hour and hit a concrete wall head first. It ripped the front off his car and fired him back across the track with the car on its side, straight into another concrete wall on the other side of the track. The front of his car was ripped off completely, and you could see Kubica's feet through the broken monocoque. Miraculously, he survived and even came back the next year and won the race to take his maiden F1 win. The weekend of the 1994 Imola Grand Prix was a tragic weekend for Formula 1, and is unfortunately best remembered for the deaths of the legendary Ayrton Senna, as well as upcoming talent Roland Ratzenberger. But a crash that is overshadowed by many from this awful weekend was the one involving Pedro Lamy and JJ Lehto at the very start of the race. When the lights went green, Lehto's car stalled from 5th position on the grid. Pedro Lamy was coming from the back of the grid and was driving at significant speed by the time he reached Lehto's stationary car. With no time to react, he drove straight into the rear of his car and it instantly sheared off 2 wheels that flew over the fence and into the crowd. Lamy's car spun and hit the wall hard, with his wrecked car eventually coming to a rest at the side of the track. Luckily, both drivers walked away without any serious injuries. The legendary 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher occupies our 10th spot with one of the biggest near misses of his racing career. One of the most successful Formula 1 drivers of all time, Schumacher returned with the newly set up Mercedes team in 2010. But when he returned, he would have been hoping to avoid crashes like this one. During the 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, he spun on this tight right-hander and unluckily put himself directly in harm's way, facing oncoming traffic right on the racing line. Vittorio Liuzzi was in the wrong place at the wrong time and had nowhere to go but directly into Schumacher. His Force India mounted Schumacher's Mercedes and narrowly missed Schumacher's head.
Down into the turn 5, and we've got 2 Mercedes side by side, and they make contact. Michael Schumacher round. Will he?
Oh, the big smash there. It's Liuzzi's gone straight into him as well. Now surely will have to be the safety car, won't it? Michael Schumacher's races over Liuzzi as well.
It was one of the scariest moments from modern-day Formula 1, and Schumacher miraculously cheated death by a matter of centimeters. Pile-ups thankfully don't happen too often in Formula 1, but when they do, they can be a completely spectacular and bizarre sight. And that's exactly what happened at the Belgian Grand Prix in 2012 at the fan-favorite Spa-Francorchamps track. The catalyst for it all was Romain Grosjean and his Lotus Renault when he drove Lewis Hamilton off the road and onto the grass before they even got to turn 1. Hamilton lost control of his car as a result and caught the back of the Lotus, sending it airborne. Both of them smashed into Fernando Alonso's Ferrari in a massive shunt, barely missing Alonso's head. Multiple other drivers were damaged in the process, but Alonso came off worst as he was fighting for the championship, and this race essentially ruined his year.
And there's Lewis Hamilton sliding into the wall, and oh dear, Romain Grosjean and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton all coming to grief at La Source, and Alonso's hopes of a 24-point scoring consecutive finish dashed within 260 meters here in Belgium. Safety car is coming out.
But luckily, nobody was injured in this insane first corner pileup that will be remembered for decades to come. The 2016 Australian Grand Prix was a hectic race to start the season, remembered primarily for this absolutely crazy crash involving Fernando Alonso and Esteban Gutierrez. During the race, Alonso was using his McLaren Honda to hunt down Gutierrez's Haas and was directly in his slipstream. When Alonso pulled to the outside to attempt the overtake, Gutierrez braked harder than Alonso expected, and he drove straight into the back of his wheel. Alonso lost control of his car and hit the wall hard, instantly smashing his car and sending him into the gravel. But that wasn't the worst part. The gravel flipped his car, sending him barrel rolling sideways and twisting in the air like a toy car. Alonso took a huge hit and his car was completely shattered. Amazingly, he was able to get out of the car himself, and although he missed the next race in Bahrain, he avoided any serious injuries in this outrageous crash. And talking about high-speed crashes, it doesn't get much worse than this one. Once upon a time, Formula One visited the States to race at the famed Indianapolis Motor Speedway, or IMS. Best known for hosting the Indy 500, IMS also has a road course inside the oval that utilizes part of the high-speed speedway, and that's exactly what F1 raced on. Unfortunately for some drivers, they learned the hard way what it feels like to hit the concrete wall at close to 200 miles per hour, and one such driver was Ralf Schumacher. While entering the final turn of the road course, he suffered a rear left puncture and crashed backwards into the concrete heavily. His car was instantly smashed to pieces and careered back onto the track, sending debris everywhere with other drivers narrowly missing him. The impact was so severe that Schumacher was briefly knocked unconscious and was placed on a stretcher to be taken to the medical center in the ambulance. Luckily, he did not sustain any major injuries in this brutal smash. This next crash happened at a track that is more known for its tight corners and precision driving than it is for its outright speed, but that doesn't mean that the crash was any less scary. On the streets of Monaco in 2011, Sergio Perez was piloting his Sauber during Saturday's final qualifying session and was pushing hard to try and prove himself as a young talent. When exiting the tunnel and approaching the ever-daunting chicane, Perez lost control and hit the inside wall at over 175 miles per hour. The front right wheel was instantly torn from the car. Suddenly, Perez found himself as a passenger and smashed the barrier side-on at insane speed. The deceleration was extremely severe and Perez suffered a concussion. He was removed from the car and the track was closed for 40 minutes to clean up the wreck. Perez learned the hard way how the streets of Monaco can bite in this nasty accident, which he was lucky to escape from without any major injuries. Clocking in at number 15 is his absolutely shocking crash from the Spa-Francorchamps during the 2001 Belgian Grand Prix, where the racing gods kept these two drivers safe after this catastrophic moment. Spa has long had a reputation for being one of the most high-speed, challenging, and potentially dangerous tracks on the Formula One calendar, and on this day in 2001, the race was overshadowed by this horrific crash between Luciano Burti and Eddie Irvine. As Burti lined up an overtake on the inside of Irvine at Blanchimont, the highest speed corner on the entire track, Burti made contact with Irvine and both cars instantly lost control. He slid into Irvine's path, went straight off the track and smashed the tire barrier head-on at over 180 miles per hour.
Alain Prost watches as Luciano Burti gets too close to Irvine, with the worst possible result.
The impact was so severe that Burti's car disappeared in the tire barrier and required a team of marshals to get him out safely. Irvine's car was wrecked, but he climbed out and helped the marshals pull Burti out of the wreckage. Alessandro Zanardi, or as he's better known, Alex Zanardi, was well known for his fearless driving style, often pulling off moves that seemed impossible. Unfortunately, he was involved in many large accidents in his career which are well documented. But the one that you may be aware of was his monster shunt from the weekend of the 1993 Belgian Grand Prix. During practice at Spa-Francorchamps, Zanardi was driving on the limit through the treacherous Eau Rouge, attempting to find the limits of his Team Lotus 107, when out of nowhere he lost control of his car and flew off the track, smashing the outside wall head-on at unbelievable speed. This huge impact caused his car to shatter, erupt in flames, and spin violently as it broke into pieces along the racetrack. It then landed in the gravel trap on the other side of the track, and when other drivers tried to avoid the sudden debris, it caused Senna to crash too. Zanardi was sidelined for 9 months after this horrific crash, but luckily recovered and went back to racing. A terrible pileup at the Monza circuit in Italy occurred on lap 1 of the Italian Grand Prix in 2000. So let's take a closer look. The track is known for having the fastest average speed on the whole calendar, so when crashes happen, they're usually big ones. However, in 2000, the race start turned into what can only be described as a nightmare, when several cars came together at the Della Roggia chicane, otherwise known as Turn 4. As the cars approached the corner, a crash involving 6 cars unfolded spectacularly. The 2 Jordan cars came together, which sparked a chain reaction that involved Rubens Barrichello, David Coulthard, Pedro de la Rosa, and Johnny Herbert. Cars were flying in the air amongst the gravel and debris that were thrown wildly across the track.
And wow, that's the 2 Jordans and a mega, that's Trulli and French. And there's many cars piling in the back. Terrible accident there. And of course the red flag will have to come out.
But miraculously, no drivers were injured in this crazy pileup. And while we're on the topic of high-speed shunts, it doesn't get much scarier than this one. The weekend of the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2003 served up some memorable moments, but none quite as dramatic as this crash that marred the event as a whole. In the most dramatic incident from the weekend, Ralf Furman was approaching Turn 4 in his Jordan during a practice session, when he suffered a mechanical failure at high speed when his rear wing completely detached from his car. The loss of downforce and sudden instability of the car threw him off the track, and Furman completely lost control, spinning into the barrier. He hit the wall hard and skated up the Armco barrier at insane speeds before smashing the tire barrier sideways in a brutal sideways impact. Furman was forced to miss both the Hungarian Grand Prix and the next race, but made a full recovery and returned to the team. As we mentioned earlier, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola is a weekend that will forever be remembered by motorsport fans for all the wrong reasons, as we lost 2 great drivers within 2 days. However, it was very lucky that a third name was not added to that list, as Rubens Barrichello suffered an almighty crash on the Friday that was overshadowed by the 2 deaths. However, Barrichello's crash was nothing short of horrific. As Barrichello was approaching the Variante Bassa corner, his car slid out of control and hit the apex, which catapulted him into the air at over 140 miles per hour. His Jordan instantly went airborne and smashed the top of the tire barrier extremely violently, flipping his car and landing upside down against the tire barriers. He was knocked unconscious and his tongue blocked his airway, threatening his life, but legendary F1 doctor Sid Watkins intervened and saved his life on the spot. And lastly, we have a bonus crash for this video. It happened in Formula 3, not Formula 1, but it was too crazy not to share with you. In 2019, Alexander Peroni was driving in the FIA Formula 3 Championship in the race in Monza, Italy, when he suffered one of the downright craziest and most terrifying crashes ever seen in modern motorsports. He was coming through the final corner, Parabolica, which is a long right-hander. Peroni was trying to maximize the track width by going as far left as possible, but he was hit with a very nasty surprise when he drove slightly outside the track limits. The track had installed an infamous sausage curb in the worst possible place, and Pironi hit it unknowingly while driving flat out. It acted like a launch pad and instantly fired his car into the air as if it had been shot from a cannon. The car went flying through the air, flipping and turning in the air at crazy speed. It traveled as far as the crash barrier, where it made a monumental impact with the catch fencing and tire barrier. It landed horribly on its side, with the tires crushing the car's cockpit and missing Pironi's head by mere centimeters. It destroyed both the fencing and the car in what was one of the most spectacular crashes ever seen. Somehow Pironi was uninjured in the crash and managed to walk away unharmed.
I think we now can show you what happened to Alex Pironi. Oh my goodness me. That is a horrific sight.
So, there we have it, the worst non-fatal F1 crashes of all time. As we saw, it's possible to have horrific crashes where you fear the worst for the driver's health or for the drivers to walk away unharmed. Let us know in the comments which of these crashes you thought was the worst, and tell us if we missed any. Please smash the like button and subscribe for more motorsports content. This has been Racer's Reverie. See you in the next video.